Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's program, Beyond Winnow, how to get the hands-on experience that employers seek. Today's event was designed to help you learn how you can use your 2L and 3L years to increase your marketability, expand your professional networks, take advantage of our DC location, and ultimately achieve your career goals. Two items that we want to mention at the beginning of the event. One, we have circulated the bios of our speakers, who include deans and alum. That will be in the chat soon, so you can read more about their backgrounds. And then two, we have reserved time toward the end of our event for our speakers to answer your questions. If you have questions throughout the event, please use the Q&A function to submit them, and we'll address them during the Q&A segment at the end of the program, or really the second half of the program. We may not get to all of your questions. However, we encourage you to continue to engage with the Career Center, clinics, and the Field Placement Office to have your questions answered and to learn more about new opportunities as they arise. That said, let's turn to our panel, and I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Dalal Worden. I'm the Dean of Career Services. That said, let's turn to our panel. First, we'll have comments about our expansive legal clinics, and that conversation will be led by Dean Lori Cohen, the GW Law's Jacob Burns Foundation Associate Dean for Clinical Affairs and Director of 2 clinics at GW Law, the Family Justice Litigation Clinic and Civil Access to Justice Clinic in the Family Division. Next, we'll have comments about our dynamic field placement program, and that conversation will be led by Dean Karen McCoy, GW Law's Assistant Dean for Field Placement. Dean Cohen, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Dean Worden. I am really thrilled to speak to you today. I'm really thrilled to speak to you today with my colleagues, Dean Worden and McCoy. Our roles at GW are so connected, and yet we have little chance to present together. We are all three focused on and committed to preparing you to launch careers that are meaningful to and right for you. So today we really want you to leave this session with an understanding that field placement and clinics are not just part of your academic curriculum and one that checks the box of experiential learning. But in addition, and even more critically, both programs are key parts of your career development and ones that you want to be really thoughtful and strategic about in taking advantage of. So a bit about the clinical program. It is an academic course of study, but also it's a public interest law firm with more than 13 different practice areas. Clinic students are certified to practice as student attorneys in DC Superior Court, the Office of Administrative Hearings, the Maryland Court of Appeals, and even in federal court. And that certification allows students to actually represent clients under faculty supervision. So students are empowered to counsel clients, draft and file pleadings and motions, issue subpoenas, draft and cross-examine witnesses, and present closing arguments. They are enabled to draft and file applications for copyrights, conduct depositions, draft and negotiate contracts, the whole gamut of lawyering tasks. And clinics allow you to learn and practice these vital lawyering skills under the supervision of an extensive feedback of professors who are nationally and internationally renowned and practicing lawyers. So at any given time, we have more than 120 attorneys and student attorneys representing more than 250 clients a year in a range of cases that involve some of the most important rights and matters there are. So I'm going to leave it to our wonderful clinic alum speakers to talk about the experience of actually being in a clinic. But I do just want to point out a couple of ways in which clinic participation can enhance your job search process. And first is faculty relationships. The student-faculty ratio in clinics is very small. So it's about 1 faculty member to 8 students. So in a clinic, you work incredibly closely with a faculty member who really gets to know you, your work, and you as a person. So they are really able to speak about you and your potential in a job in a very educated and deep way, and they are committed to your success. Second, in a clinic, you get exposures to a wide range of judges, other lawyers, employers, clients, people who might be able to support you or even hire you. And finally, and I think we'll probably talk about this more, both the clinics and field placement obviously are wonderful for your resume. They give you talking points for interviews. They give you the opportunity to develop writing samples. So not only do clinics build up your lawyering skills and allow you to try on a practice area and hone your professionalism, but they concretely enhance your marketability. So without further ado, I am really thrilled to turn the program over to clinic alums, Ashley, who I'm proud to say was in my clinic, and Dom, to speak more about their clinic experiences.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. As Lori mentioned, I was her clinic student. So during my time at GW Law, I actually participated in 2 different clinics. In my 2L year, I was a student attorney in the Family Justice Litigation Clinic for 2 semesters. And then in my 3L year, I was a student attorney in the Criminal Appeals and Post-Conviction Services, CAPS clinic with Professor Ann Olson. And I was in that clinic also for a full year. So I had just incredible opportunities, fortunately for me. In my current role, I am a supervising attorney at the DC Volunteer Lawyers Project. I supervise cases in the domestic violence, appellate, and policy practice areas. So about 50% of my job is providing representation to survivors of domestic violence in civil protection order cases at DC Superior Court. And about 50% of my practice is representing survivors who've received negative judgments in appeals before the DC Court of Appeals, and also appearing before bodies like the DC Council to recommend and advocate for policies that benefit survivors of domestic violence. I've been asked to give a little bit of background into sort of how clinics have shaped my current career and how I made my way to my current career. And I think the truth is that clinics essentially made me the lawyer that I am today. I came to law school fairly certain that I wanted to be a public defender. I have always loved criminal law, and I was really interested in advocating for people who lived in poverty and people who I felt were not fairly treated by the justice system. But I had also been really passionate about sexual assault and domestic violence. In my undergrad career, I was a sexual assault counselor with a local rape crisis organization. And I was very interested in the way that trauma impacted people. It was something that also shaped my interest in public defense because so many of the clients that I wanted to work with had been victims of trauma at one point or another. So when I started looking at my 2L year, I knew I wanted to be a litigator, and I knew that I wanted to get involved in clinics as soon as possible because it was the best way to get involved with actually representing clients and get your feet wet, actually get into court. And both of the criminal practice clinics that I was interested in, I could not do until my 3L year. But the Family Justice Litigation Clinic was open to 2L students. And I was really passionate about the work that they did. I was really passionate about the types of clients that they got to work with. So I decided that I wanted to do that clinic as early as possible. And then in my head, I sort of had planned that I would try to do a criminal clinic later. What actually happened was that the Family Justice Litigation Clinic sort of changed the trajectory of my career. I started serving clients and really just loved the work that I got to do, loved the clients that I got to work with, and sort of changed some of my mind about what I wanted to do. And of course, then in my 3L year, I did the Criminal Appeals and Post-Conviction Services Clinic and realized that I hadn't changed my mind as much as I had thought because I also loved that work and loved the clients that I got to work with, loved the kinds of things that I was doing. So following my time as a law student, I spent 2 years clerking at DC Superior Court for Judge Mary Beth Raffanen, working on both criminal cases and domestic violence cases, very fortunately for me. Still love both types of law and still haven't entirely made up my mind about what I want to do. But I certainly have been doing work in the domestic violence field since I left. And I'm happy to talk more about what I do, the way that clinic has shaped what I do. But really, both of those experiences have completely changed my career.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for giving such a great introduction and really diving into clinic. While Ashley's an esteemed clinic alum and a supervising attorney, I'm still a law student. I'm currently a 3L at GW, and I'll talk a little bit about my experience 2L and 3L, and then really dive into how clinic has helped me shape my young legal career. As a 1L, I participated in a number of competitions and I earned spots on the moot court board, on a journal, the alternative dispute resolution board. And I know I'm talking about clinic, but field placement wise, I've participated in a number of internships like at the SEC, the DOJ, and Senate Judiciary Committee. But from the beginning of law school, I was always interested in GW's Small Business and Community Economic Development Clinic, and I participated in that last semester. So coming into GW, I understood that clinic was a way to really work with clients and shape your legal career. And a lot of times in law school, you focus on classes like civil procedure, constitutional law, litigation-based classes. And there are fewer, though there are numerous opportunities to participate in transactional work, whether that be the small business clinic or whether that be your coursework. But I had met Professor Jones early on, and Professor Jones is the director of the Small Business Clinic, and she really inspired me and inspired the students I worked with to participate in this clinic. In this clinic, we worked with a lot of small businesses and a lot of different organizations in the DC community, like cooperatives, worker cooperatives, and small businesses and family-run businesses. And we do everything from working on tax matters, advocating on whether or not a nonprofit can lobby, drafting contracts for people who are sole proprietor businesses who want to work in the community. And when I got to clinic, I was able to do all of these things, and really it was so much different from law school, where you're just creating these hypothetical situations, to actually doing it in real life. When my clinic team, so clinic, in my clinic, we had 8 students and we were in 2 teams. So I remember meeting our first client for the first time and realizing that, this is a real person with their own business coming to you with these questions that they don't have answers to, and you need to find answers to. So to talk about skills that you get from clinic, being able to communicate with clients, being able to counsel clients on, can you get answers to these questions? And then what are the answers to these questions? Are things that help me shape my legal career. And I think that goes for all of the clinics, both the clinics that Ashley and I participated in. Fortunately, I was able to get postgraduate employment prior to participating in clinic because I was a 3L. I'll be working at Kirkland & Ellis in New York after school, but even in my own group at the firm I'll be going to, there are people that have participated in the small business clinic, both in my group and in other groups. I think I've met 5 people already that have participated in my clinic or other clinics at the firm, which just goes to show you the practical experience and the connection you can build. So clinic has been a really great experience. I've recommended it to my friends and they've loved it as well. And you can really use clinic to gain practical skills, as well as connect with people at law firms that may interview you. And in my first interview, someone who interviewed me was in the small business clinic, though I wasn't in it yet. So I have so many positive things to say about clinic, but I'll save some more of those for you all's questions.
Sorry, let me unmute there. Thank you for that information. It's really good to also hear about clinics where you got to work on transactional matters. I don't think every law school has those available, so that's definitely a positive thing to hear about programming here available at GW Law. With that, let's hand it over to Dean McCoy. The floor is yours for field placement.
Thank you, Dean Worden. Thank you also, Dean Cohn, and to all of my colleagues that worked so hard to make today happen. But most importantly, I want to thank our panelists. Every single one of you is an inspiration. And I want to thank our future counselors that have joined us today. I am Carrie McCoy, your Assistant Dean for Field Placement. And I want to take my brief time today to focus on the topic of marketability. But I want to begin by giving you a homework assignment. And that assignment is for you to think about why you came to law school and what your career goals are. And then when you think about that, I want you to think next about how you will get from where you are today to where you want to be in your careers. We've had some discussion about interviews. What will you say in an interview? How will you separate yourself from other candidates? Why should an employer pick you? Telling an employer that you have an interest or passion in something is not going to be enough. You need to have skills, you need to develop your marketability, and you need to have a professional network that can assist you in achieving your career goals. In field placement, you'll get all of that and more. GW Law's field placement program is our externship program. With more than 500 students externing each year, we are one of the largest legal externship programs, not just in the DC area, but in the entire country. As I love to say, and any of you who are connected with me on LinkedIn will see that I love field placement. I love highlighting our placements and our students and our professors. And as I love to say, we have more student externs than some schools actually have law students. Mic drop. GW Law, you will not have a better place to attend law school in order to increase your marketability through your practical experience. In field placement, you will earn academic credit for your unpaid work with government, judicial, and nonprofit organizations. Your externships may be in person, they may be remote, or they may be in a hybrid format. The program is extremely flexible. You will be supervised by judges and practicing attorneys. Many of our student externs enroll in multiple externships. You will also be enrolled concurrently in a co-requisite course, and that course will be specifically designed to complement your particular externship experience. In terms of eligibility, once you have completed your first year curriculum, you will be eligible to participate in field placement. There is no GPA requirement. In fact, many of the externship opportunities that you will see posted on CORE do not even request a transcript. You may participate in field placement in the fall, spring, or summer semesters. We have so many employers coming to us that we have opportunities for you throughout the year. That is not something that you will see at all law schools. And I bet that's one of the reasons you decided to come to DC. So where do our students work? We don't have enough time. If I spent the entire hour reading where our students have externed, I could not finish in the hour. But to give you just a few examples, the Department of Justice, which was mentioned, Department of State, Department of Energy, the Patent and Trademark Office, the World Bank, courts at all levels, the White House, prosecutors' offices, public defenders' offices, the ACLU, legal services. The list is really endless. Now, next steps for you. The first thing that I want you to do is complete your homework assignment. Develop a plan to achieve your career goals. Number two, in developing that plan, I want you to work closely with the Career Center. They can help you to develop a plan, and they can help you to identify externship opportunities that will help you to achieve your career goals. And then, of course, we want you to register for field placement. Information about our program is available to you at any time on the Field Placement Programs portal page. You can also reach out to us at any time with questions. We are located conveniently just next to the SCC in Lisner 204. So now I will turn it over to our panelists. I am honored to present both Summer and Jamond, and we will begin with Summer.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me. My name is Summer Menifee. I am a 3L, and I did my field placement at the Office of the Attorney General for the District of Columbia in the Family Services Division. So when I first started at GW Law, I really had no idea what type of law I wanted to go into. So my 1L job search was pretty haphazard. But I did know that I enjoyed my criminal law class. So one of the places I applied was the U.S. Attorney's Office for Nashville, Tennessee, which is where I'm from. And I ended up interning there for my 1L summer. And while I was there, I had mentors in the child exploitation and human trafficking divisions. And I realized that that special victims work was really interesting to me. So I wanted to look more into it. So following that, for my 2L fall, I interned at the Office of the Attorney General for Baltimore, Maryland in the Organized Crime Division, focusing on human trafficking issues. And then I did the Domestic Violence Project Clinic, where I was at the DC Coalition Against Domestic Violence, working on policy-based DV programs. This last summer, I was at Equitas, the prosecutor's resource for gender-based violence, where I would answer gender-based violence research questions for prosecutors throughout the country. So following those experiences, I knew that I was on the right track with special victims work, and I still really enjoyed it, but I also realized that I was specifically interested in cases involving children, and that I hadn't really gotten a lot of trial prep work in. So with those two things in mind, I was brought to the DC Office of the Attorney General, which is where I did my field placement. And when I interviewed with them and they asked me what section I wanted to be in, I told them I wanted to be in the Family Services Division. So at the Family Services Division, I basically had two cases that I worked on, one involving physical abuse and one involving emotional abuse and neglect. And I just I worked on material for those two cases throughout the semester. So this was everything from preparing exhibits, responding to requests for admissions, drafting opening and closing statements, drafting direct examinations of expert witnesses, and attending preliminary hearings, forensic examinations, and trials. And what I really loved about this was that it allowed me to sort of become a mini expert on the facts and legal issues of my specific cases. And it also allowed me to both feel very invested in the cases and feel like I actually played a role in how they turned out. And beyond that, I got a lot of trial work prep experience, which was really important to me. So following that, at the end of my internship, I felt both a newfound confidence in the type of work that I was doing and that I was on the right track with special victims work and child exploitation work. And I felt more confident in the amount of practice I had had. So taking that into my job search, I was specifically drawn to the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, both because they had a really great juvenile rehabilitation program and because they have a special victims unit. So when I interviewed with the Philadelphia DA's office, I got to both say what specifically drew me to them and talk about my experiences that I'd had that made me so interested in this subject and sort of my journey and what brought me to them. And I also got to go into detail about specific projects I worked on. And I was eventually offered a job as an assistant district attorney, which I will be starting this fall after graduation. So thank you so much for having me here, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jamon Perry. I want to thank you for inviting me to speak about field placement. I would say that participating in field placement was a critical springboard to what I'm doing now. I am now a legal advisor and counsel to a commissioner here at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. His name is Commissioner Willie Phillips. And so when we talk about the specific steps that I took to get this job that I have now, which I believe is a very important job, I came to law school not really knowing what I wanted to do. I knew that education issues and issues around the family and children was an important issue for me. But when I got to the law school, I was inundated with many requests to go to a law firm for my 1L summer. And so, you know, I put my application in and I got the job to go to a boutique law firm that focused on energy and environmental matters in Georgetown. And that firm was Van Ness Feldman. And so, you know, I did energy work there, and I worked closely with attorneys at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, but I didn't really, I did enjoy my work, but I didn't really know a lot about the industry because the energy regulatory industry is very narrow, but infinitely deep, meaning that there's a bunch of issues that come up in the energy sphere. So at the end of the summer, one of the partners said to me, you know, one of our alum, you know, from the law firm works at the Public Service Commission of the District of Columbia. He is a commissioner there, meaning that he is one of the chief executive officers of the commission and of the DC Commission. And so, and she asked me, did I want to meet him? Did I want to, you know, have lunch with him and just talk through some issues? And so I met with him. But the thing that I want to get across to you is when I met with him, it wasn't a complete recitation of my resume. It was just getting to know him, being friends, just talking about, you know, the football game or the baseball game, or talking about his kids, or talking about a new movie that's coming out. It was just a very, very normal conversation. He knew I was qualified because I was a 1L summer associate at his law firm. So he knew I was qualified. So the most important part I want to bring into this conversation is about networking and marketability. When you network, I don't believe that you have to go along this long list of your accomplishments and your positions and things like that. You're really working to build those relationships and to become friends with the person that you're networking with. And so after I met with him, you know, he told me, you know, Jermon, I want you to come and work with me through field placement. And so I got together with the former dean of field placement, and we got all my paperwork together, and I went to the commission. And I believe that I did wonderful work there. And, you know, after I graduated from law school, I went to another law firm. And then I transitioned back into the commission after my field placement experience. Did good work there. And that commissioner who I networked with, Commissioner Willie Phillips, he was asked by President Biden, would he like to be nominated to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission? And after he was nominated, he then tapped me, he then called me and asked me, would I go over as his legal advisor and counsel? So my career has taken many turns since law school, but I do believe that I'm in the job that I was meant for, that I know. And I would never have met the commissioner without field placement. And that is truly a very sincere statement. So thanks for having me, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, thank you. So as I mentioned before, the second half of this event is pretty much reserved for questions and answers. I've already seen some questions coming in here from the staff who's doing a wonderful job taking your questions. So by all means, please keep sending those in. Also, note that I'm not going to necessarily read them verbatim. I'm going to try to combine a few of them so that we can have more panelists answer. So that said, I want to talk about a few points here that I heard some of our panelists mention. The first one being marketability, and also the idea that your first job as a practicing attorney isn't necessarily going to be your last job. So you can have, it's not really a career change, but there's movement between employers. And some of that is strategic. One would hope that is strategic. And then some of that is at times a result of kind of like macroeconomic factors. So that said, if we can have the alum, if you will, if you talk a little bit about how you how you used your experience either in clinics or field placement to help you identify the skills that you wanted to develop so that you could be in the jobs that you now have. Either of you can go first. Ashley, if you want to take that one.
Sure, I can start. So I think that both of my clinics taught me very essential skills in what I wanted to do, not in just in terms of substantive law. Obviously, it was very helpful. For example, when I was interviewing for my first postgraduate job, which was my clerkship, it was helpful that I had a background in both family law and domestic violence and in criminal law, because the judge was at the time on a criminal calendar and had planned to move to a domestic violence calendar, which I did not know when she interviewed me. But the skills that I actually learned other than just the substantive law were really the essential building blocks of being an attorney, right? What is a motion? What does that mean? When you file a motion, what happens? What do you do? When you walk into a hearing, what are the expectations of what you're going to say? Who's involved? Just the step-by-step of walking into a courthouse and where do you go? What's the first step that you take? One thing that I think was really essential about particularly the Family Justice Litigation Clinic was that it taught me negotiation skills. As a student attorney, I conducted a negotiation in a custody matter with an opposing party who was unrepresented. And the skills that I learned in that negotiation, I still use to this day, particularly when I'm negotiating with unrepresented parties. So all of those skills sort of taught me, the building blocks of how to be an attorney. And taking those into my clerkship, I sort of understood more about the process than I thought I did. So I was able to hit the ground running in that sense. And then in terms of my second clinic, the appellate process is very different from trial preparation. It's very different from moot court. Handling an appellate case from beginning to end and knowing every single step along the way is a skill that you don't get anywhere else, I would say. Other than working on appellate cases, sort of as, if you were an extern and you worked on appellate cases, you might get similar experience, but really being the attorney, walking through the steps of how do I get the appellate record? How do I get the trial transcripts? How do I read them and understand what's happening? Those are skills that you can only really learn by doing, I think. And so all of those skills were really essential to me, particularly when I was moving from my last job to my current job. I spent my first 2 years at the DC Volunteer Lawyers Project as an Equal Justice Works Fellow. And I was on the ground every day representing people directly in protection order cases. But when my fellowship ended and the time came for me to decide if I wanted to stay at DCVLP, and I was sort of asked, what work do you want to be doing if you're going to be working here? I really was able to say, I love working with survivors. I love trial work, but I know also that I love appellate work. And that's something that we don't currently offer. And I would love to be a part of making that happen. And that was because I had already developed those skills and I had proven that I had represented someone successfully in an appeal. I was able to market myself into a brand new position that didn't exist before I came to DCVLP, and sort of write my own ticket, which was pretty incredible for DCVLP to do. So I would say that those skills have been essential to every job that I've had so far. And I honestly, the clinics were the best learning experience that I had in my entire time at GW.
Thank you. Thank you. Jamal, would you like to add some comments on that question?
Sure. I would just like to say, I believe that field placement was one of the best things for me as well. The current job I hold as legal advisor and counsel to Commissioner Willie Phillips at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, it doesn't really have we don't really take a lot of time and space for on-the-job training, because these issues are so big and so important and so massive. You need a base of experience already to be able to confront those issues. And so doing field placement when I was I would say a child in the energy world, I learned the basic building blocks of energy regulation or utility regulation. As you know, utilities like Pepco or Georgia Power or whatever, these places are natural monopolies, meaning that they're the only game in town. at the end of every month, every resident in DC has to pay Pepco a bill for their services. And so what the commission does, we work with those utilities to ensure just and reasonable rates, and also to ensure that those utilities are able to recover their cost of service, but also able to furnish out reasonable service to consumers. And so I learned all of this doing field placement. So I could not be doing the job now if I didn't have that base of knowledge there already. And so I do believe field placement prepared me just for the more simple, even the more simple issues at my job, such as reactive power. When you're trying to recover a reactive power tariff requirement, you don't want to be looking at that for the first time. And I think field placement gave me that that bird's eye view into utility regulation and energy regulation to be able to do my job now.
Thank you. So we've mentioned the word marketability a few times. When I was in business school, that similar concept was, we phrased it as, what is your value proposition, right? When you go to speak with a potential employer, what they're looking for, particularly in your, not an internship, but your full-time role is, can you come in and do the job on day one? We talk a lot about grades for students because grades are one indicator of one's ability to perform the job. Again, one indicator. When I was in a hiring manager role, I can tell you quite honestly that I spent significantly less time looking at someone's transcript than I did at their resume. When I looked at a transcript, I generally was looking to see what courses did the student or the applicant take. Are any of those courses relevant to the work that we're doing in the office? Didn't necessarily spend a lot of time on GPA. But when I looked at individuals' resumes, what I was really looking for is, particularly when I was in public interest space working in federal government or in higher ed for state schools, have you demonstrated an interest in this type of work by what you have done in the past, right? And so it is very hard to sell yourself to an employer if you haven't taken courses that fall into their area of practice, and you also haven't had any internships or full-time experience, unless you're doing like a hard career pivot and you're able to tell them that explicitly. So that said, I'd like to now ask a question to Summer and Don regarding with two things. One, how you went about finding or deciding which field placement opportunities to apply to, or with regard to the clinic, which clinic and subject matter you wanted to study, and then how you use that information and those experiences as you're applying for current positions, like how you pitched that, made yourself marketable using that experience during interviews. Either of you can go first.
Yes, so I had a lot of gender-based violence prosecutorial experiences, but again, I knew I wanted to do something involving children. So with the Office of the Attorney General, they basically just asked me what section I wanted to go into, and I was very specific that I wanted to be in the Family Services Division. So I really appreciated their sort of flexibility with kind of letting me go into any section I wanted. And it was really easy to pitch to the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office because they are so focused on juvenile work. And so I got to talk a lot about why I was so specifically interested in that. And then also just talk about the trial experience work I'd had, because again, I think experience is so important. And I also want to say that I was not asked about my GPA at all. Everything I talked about was experience-based or just classes I had taken that were relevant.
Thank you.
So I think for me, coming into law school, as many of you one else may be doing, are balancing litigation, transactional, and different practice areas of law. As I did. And when I did, I was leaning a little bit more towards non-litigation roles and what those were. So when I looked for experiences and opportunities outside of courses, clinic was probably the most prominent opportunity that stood out, particularly the Small Business and Community Economic Development Clinic. I had done some prior work as an undergraduate student working with community economic development. So both for career opportunities and just personally, it really resonated with me. Though I was able to get postgraduate employment prior to clinic, as I said in my intro, the people who interviewed me for screening interviews, there were individuals who participated in clinics that were different, and then one particular individual who participated in the same clinic. And in the interview, we connected over Professor Jones and her impact on me as a 1L and her impact on my interviewer. And we were able to talk about the experiences that you get and the skills you learn from a clinic, because whatever clinic you're in, you understand that seldom as a law student, you get to work with real clients, and real problems. So in one of my classes, I had to draft agreements and contracts, and, I got a grade in that class, but in my clinic, I had to draft agreements and contracts for a client that they would use, that if that contract is breached, they would have to go into a real life mediation or settlement or may possibly get sued. So it's a really good way to, in speaking about marketability, it's a really good way to show or display that, not only can I do this in the classroom, but I have done this as a law student in real practice. And you have your professors there to guide you along the way, but it's something, whether it's just on your resume or something you talk about, something you can show to show that you got that real experience. And that's something that I wasn't able to find outside of the classes. So whether it's clinic or field placement, that's really a way to show that you're using the skills already.
Great, thank you. This next question is open to any of our four panelists. When we talk about networking, particularly in career services, a lot of individuals will think that networking is something that you do only when you're looking for a job, right? So you go out, you have conversations with people, and it's a tactical exercise in terms of, I'm looking for a job, let me talk to the right person. I don't think that's a winning strategy in most cases. But what I do think is a winning strategy is when you have the opportunity to be in an environment where you have clients, or you're in an environment where you're around attorneys doing the type of work that you want to do. That is the latter part here. That is a great opportunity for networking beyond just a simple tactical thing of, I'm looking for a job, therefore I'm having a conversation with you. But really, and to Jamon's point, where you have these you meet with people and you have conversations that can be wide ranging. So you may be talking about sports, you may be talking about other things, but ultimately you're building a relationship, because the practice of law ultimately becomes very relational, particularly if you're in private practice and you want to make partner. It's about, do you have a book of business? How do you bring in clients to the organization? But then even in the public sector, you're also looking at developing relationships with people who have subject matter expertise in the area of law in which you're working. So when I was in California doing higher education law, I would probably about once or twice a week get a question where I did not know the answer to it, did not have the time to sit down and research it, but I knew who to call. And I could call general counsel, who would be my counterpart at another organization, and say, have you dealt with this situation before? So all of that said, if you can comment on, again, for all four of you, whoever wants to chime in, if you can comment on how you use the opportunity in your clinical placement or your externship or early career jobs as well, to build a network that you have essentially, not, even if not a formal mentor, but you had individuals guiding you and providing you with information about, these are the types of things that you want to do if you want to practice in this area of law. And then also, these are the types of things you want to do if you just want to become a really skilled attorney. So whoever would like to jump in first.
I agree. I agree that networking is not about, hey, I want a job, and so I'm showing up here, to see you. When I met Commissioner Phillips, I was not looking for a job. I was already a summer associate at a law firm. I met him because, it was recommended to meet him because he was an influential figure in the city, and also because I wanted to build my network. Once you start working, you're going to have opportunities to build your network officially and on either government time or the law firm time or wherever you're working. And so 1L should begin to, if they don't have these skills already, they should begin to build social skills and how to converse with people and how to pick up on social cues and on emotional cues. And that's what those normal conversations that you have with the person that you're networking with, such as talking about the movies or talking about the weather or anything like that. You want to be personable, you want to be sociable, and at the end you want to be employable. But of course, that shouldn't be the main goal of the meeting. The main goal should be to expand your network, to expand your social skills. So when you do get in that official position, you're able to bring in business, bring in clients, and to do whatever is required of you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to comment?
Sure. I also agree that, networking is not just about looking for a job. And I want to say that I think there are two sort of places where we're networking constantly that we're really not thinking about necessarily as networking, but we should be. And I think the first is your classmates. And particularly in a setting like clinic, where you have such small classes. I think that the maximum number of people in each of my clinics was 10. So it was me and 9 other people who spent, an entire semester, or in the case of CAPS, an entire year together. These are still people that I talk to today, people that, when I was a 2L in the Family Justice Litigation Clinic, I worked with Jumi Obayanju, who some of you might know. She's an incredible attorney, and she was a 3L while I was a 2L. So I was working with someone who was older than me. And the first thing that she did following law school was go to Superior Court to clerk. And so obviously a year later, when I sort of followed her to Superior Court to clerk for a different judge, I already knew her, and I knew that I could A, have a friendly face at DC Superior Court, and B, I could go to her when I had questions about, interacting with a judge or sort of the role of a law clerk. If I had questions about how something worked, I knew someone who I could go to and talk to. And Jumi, of course, has had an incredible career since then. If you're not familiar with her, she's on the GW Law website all the time, so you might be. She has this incredible career in racial justice and racial equity, and just following her work, really developed, my own sense of those issues in some ways. And so I think that connecting with your classmates in that way, there was also a chance that someone who's interested in the same field as you is also going to go into that field postgraduate, right? So another classmate of mine, Ruth Perrin, who was in the Family Justice Litigation Clinic with me, later went to work at the Network for Victim Recovery, which is another nonprofit in DC that focuses on the same kind of work as me. So your classmates may end up in the same place as you or in a similar place to you, and it's really important to think about those connections and the way that you can network with those people, not necessarily to get a job, but to sort of help grow you in other different ways. I think the other networking opportunity is really your professors. I will tell you that both Professor Cohn and Professor Olson have had a huge impact on me, and not just on my ability to get a job. I have asked them for advice and counsel about jobs that I have been offered, jobs that I've been interested in, but even just, where should I be looking to move to next? What goals should I be setting? What sorts of things should I be doing in my career to set myself up for success later? I think that those are things that your professors can offer you. And certainly your professors are also very connected in the DC community at large with other people that you might want to talk to, other people that you might be interested in learning from. And so having a clinic professor who has sort of worked with you for an entire year, knows a lot about you, knows a lot about your skills, where you excel, where you have room for growth. I think that that's just essential. And so I feel like both of those are ways that you can utilize clinic, not just as, the this experiential learning process, in the classroom, but also it becomes part of your network, and it should.
Thank you. So just seeing a few questions come in, I'm going to kind of consolidate them here. There's a question regarding, grades, essentially. Grades aren't necessarily at the level the person thought they, or not at the level they want to be, and how to address that. And then a similar question in terms of how career services helps current students with their marketability as they seek internships and ultimately post JD positions. Honestly, that's why we're here today. We're really looking at it in a dual sense. Participating in a clinic or field placement isn't something that you only do because you're not in the top 15% of the class. It's something that I think people should do because it's very beneficial in the sense of coming to work prepared to do the job on day one. I think many people know that I have a MBA as well. And the difference between JD and business school is in business school or post MBA, when you're being hired, there's a great emphasis on, do you already have experience in this area? Did you already work in operations? Did you already work in marketing? Did you already work in investment banking? I think that particularly in the private sector, that is becoming more true for hiring, where it is not simply a matter of, did you have the highest grades amongst your cohort or your classmates, but do you have relevant experience? Because there's a difference in the study of law as an academic exercise and the practice of law in a multi-billion-dollar industry in the country and internationally. So that said, Summer, you've mentioned that you're pretty self-directed in terms of knowing the types of work or the type of work that you want to do. How did that inform your decision to look for experiential learning exercise, or look for experiential learning opportunities, and to use that to I'll say buttress your marketability as you're approaching employers in that area of law in which you're so very specifically focused?
Yeah, I think the best thing you can do with, I guess, the criminal law is be very specific and prove that you are interested in that particular field. I think that's really what they're looking for. So I personally wanted to have as many experiences as possible showing that I'm interested in criminal law, and that's what brought me to field placement. And I will say that during multiple interviews I have had people specifically tell me, you are clearly interested in this. So I think personally experience is the best thing you can have. At least that's been what I've known. And I think the more you can talk about varying experiences you've had, and the more you can prove that you have not only done this once, but you've continued to do these types of internships, the better off you'll be.
Thank you. And Dom, you mentioned earlier that you've done work with small businesses and economic development. I used to be an attorney at the Economic Development Administration in the U.S. Department of Commerce, so only a few blocks here from GW Law Campus. And as you were speaking, I was like, man, where was this guy back when I needed an intern? Because like he'd have been perfect. How have you used that experience and that knowledge to convey your interest in the type of work being done? I believe you said you're going to Kirkland, the type of work that a very large international law firm is doing.
So first, to preface that, and just to comment on Summer's point, I think experience is essential, because while I did have community economic development, small business experience, it was as an undergrad. And I came straight, I didn't have any prior work experience. I came right after undergrad to law school, and I wanted to have internships and practical experience to show that I can, not only have I displayed these skills through school, but I've actually applied them. So in transitioning that to how do I go from doing community economic development, participating in a clinic, to going to a big law firm, the skills are what remain the same. just as I'm working with clients, just as I had worked with clients during clinic, and just as I had worked with clients in my internship positions, I'm showing that I have the ability to communicate with a client, or I have the ability to counsel a client or provide judgment, because lawyers at the end of the day are in the judgment business. So in order to be able to show that, that's your value add. So not only can you do that by taking class, but I have done that and I have shown that. So it was a great way to show that I can display those skills, whether it be for a small business or a billion-dollar company. Though you're building those foundational building blocks in order to serve your client, because we're in the judgment business and we're in the client service business.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it. We're getting close to the end here, so I want to give an opportunity for each of you to provide any brief closing remarks. Let's start with, I'm just going to go who's in the top corner here. Ashley, if we can start with you.
I guess I would say do a clinic. I think that, those are skills that you can take really into any field. Don't think that you have to be interested in one particular field to do a clinic in that field, right? So don't feel like you have to want to be a domestic violence lawyer to go do a family litigation clinic. Don't feel like you have to want to be a criminal defense attorney to go do DC law students in court. There's, so many different opportunities out there, and you're going to learn so much from each of them. And all of those skills are going to be marketable. It's not just about the substantive area of law. So I would say if you get the chance to do a clinic, do a clinic.
Thank you. Don?
I guess do a clinic is great advice from me too, but take advantage of being in DC. There's a wealth of opportunities, and now there are opportunities around the country because of the ability to do a remote internship. Even if you know what you want to do, seek out those opportunities. And if you don't know what you want to do, I did an internship every semester because I wanted to try different roles. I wanted to try what it was like to work at an agency, try what it was like to work, be at a clinic and do different types of work, so that when I go start my legal career, I have an understanding of some things I like and some things I don't like. So beyond class, it's a great way to supplement your legal experiences and education.
Thank you. Summer?
Yes, so I'll just say that if you do a field placement, I have learned from experience that the best way to take advantage of it is to ask for what you want. So that includes asking for specific assignments, telling them what fields you're the most interested in, and asking a lot of questions.
Thank you. And Juwan?
I would just like to add that grades are important. We all know that. 1L grades particularly are important for OCI and going to a firm. However, everyone is not going to get all A's. I didn't get all A's. And everyone is not going to be able to go to a firm. So I would say do field placement because grades only show that you can apply the law to the facts. However, and be able to write a memo or a brief, which are important skills, but field placement and networking, that shows that you're a good person, that you're able to learn the specific substantive law of your field, and that you're able to work with people. And so I would say, even though grades are important, don't obsess too much over your grades if you don't get the grades that you prefer. Because you still can have a very, very good career, and 5 years down the road, you could be general counsel of a company. So please take that advice.
Thank you. Just some quick announcements here before we conclude. So for field placement, registration for summer 2022 field placement opens on March 29th. And for fall of 22 opens on June 27th. And then for clinics, they'll be hosting information sessions on February 23rd, February 24th, and February 28th. I'd also like to take this opportunity to encourage all of the students who've attended today's session to come and speak with the deans and our staff. That's why we're here, to advise you and provide information both about our programs and then also with career services specifically advice on how you strategically approach defining where you want to be as a practicing attorney or within the legal industry. And seeing that we are precisely at 1 o'clock, I want to say thank you to the panelists. We appreciate you taking the time from your busy schedules to be with us today. And I look forward to the opportunity to speaking with you again. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon. And also thank you to everyone who helped organize this event. Thanks.